trickle-down economics, and the trickle-down theory are terms in United States politics to refer to the idea that tax breaks or other economic benefits provided to businesses and upper income levels will benefit poorer members of society by improving the economy as a whole. The term has been attributed to humorist Will Rogers, who said of the New Deal that money was all appropriated for the top in hopes that it would trickle down to the needy. Today, trickle-down economics is most closely identified with the economic policies known as Reaganomics, or laissez-faire. David Stockman, who as Reagan's budget director championed these cuts at first but then became skeptical of them, told journalist William Greider that the supply-side economics is the trickle-down idea. It's kind of hard to sell trickle-down, so the supply-side formula was the only way to get a tax policy that was really trickle-down. Supply-side is trickle-down theory. Context: economist Thomas Sowell has written that the actual path of money in a private enterprise economy is quite the opposite of that claimed by people who refer to the trickle-down theory. He noted that money invested in new business ventures is first paid out to employees, suppliers, and contractors. Only some time later, if the business is profitable, does money return to the business owner euro, but in the absence of a profit motive, which is reduced in the aggregate by a raise in marginal tax rates in the upper tiers, this activity does not occur. Sowell further has made the case that no economist has ever advocated a trickle-down theory of economics, which is rather a misnomer attributed to certain economic ideas by political critics who either willfully distort or misunderstand the actual stated goals of their political opponents. Although the term trickle-down is mainly political and does not denote a specific economic theory, some economic theories reflect the meaning of this pejorative. Some macroeconomic models assume that a certain proportion of each dollar of income will be saved. This is called the marginal propensity to save. Many studies have found that the marginal propensity to save is considerably higher among wealthier people. Policies, including tax cuts, that seek to increase saving are often aimed at the wealthy for this reason. Saving usually means some form of investment, as even money placed in savings accounts is ultimately invested by the banks. In the early 1990s congressional records, non-pejorative uses of the term are rare but do appear. Criticisms. The economist John Kenneth Galbraith noted that trickle-down economics had been tried before in the United States in the 1890s under the name horse and sparrow theory. He wrote, Mr. David Stockman has said that supply-side economics was merely a cover for the trickle-down approach to economic policy what an older and less elegant generation called the horse and sparrow theory. If you feed the horse enough oats, some will pass through to the road for the sparrows. Galbraith claimed that the horse and sparrow theory was partly to blame for the Panic of 1896. Proponents of Keynesian economics and related theories often criticize tax rate cuts for the wealthy as being trickled down, arguing tax cuts directly targeting those with less income would be more economically stimulative. Keynesians generally argue for broad fiscal policies that are directed across the entire economy, not toward one specific group. In his 1919 address to Congress, Woodrow Wilson warned that, at some point, high rates of income and profits taxes discourage energy, remove the incentive to new enterprise, encourage extravagant expenditures, and produce industrial stagnation with consequent unemployment and other attendant evils. In a 1962 address to Congress, John F. Kennedy said, it is a paradoxical truth that tax rates are too high today and tax revenues are too low, and the soundest way to raise the revenues in the long run is to cut the rates now. This was not a new idea. John Maynard Keynes said, back in 1933, that taxation may be so high as to defeat its object, that in the long run, a reduction of the tax rate will run a better chance, than an increase, of balancing the budget. In the 1992 presidential election, independent candidate Ross Perot called trickle-down economics political voodoo. In New Zealand, Labour Party MP Damien O'Connor has, in the Labour Party campaign launch video for the 2011 general election, called Trickle-down Economics the rich pissing on the poor. A 2012 study by the Tax Justice Network indicates that wealth of the super-rich does not trickle down to improve the economy, but tends to be amassed and sheltered in tax havens with a negative effect on the tax bases of the home economy. Professor Ha-Jun Chang at the University of Cambridge has criticized the policies of trickle-down advocates in several publications, citing examples of slowing growth in the last few decades, rising income inequality in most rich nations, and the effectiveness of welfare provision in raising living standards across all income brackets rather than at the top only. Theory explaining wealth condensation in the hands of rich is called Matthew effect. History and usage of the term. In 1896, Democratic presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan made reference to trickle-down theory in his famous Cross of Gold speech. There are two ideas of government. There are those who believe that if you just legislate to make the well-to-do prosperous, that their prosperity will leak through on those below. The Democratic idea has been that if you legislate to make the masses prosperous, their prosperity will find its way up and through every class that rests upon it. The Merriam-Webster dictionary notes that the first known use of trickle-down as an adjective meaning relating to or working on the principle of trickle-down theory was in 1944, while the first known use of trickle-down theory was in 1954. After leaving the presidency, Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, alleged Republicans simply don't know how to manage the economy. They're so busy operating the trickle-down theory, giving the richest corporations the biggest break, that the whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket. Speaking on the Senate floor in 1992, Senator Hank Brown said, "Mr. President, the trickle-down theory attributed to the Republican Party has never been articulated by President Reagan and has never been articulated by President Bush and has never been advocated by either one of them. One might argue whether trickle-down makes any sense or not. To attribute to people who have advocated the opposite in policies is not only inaccurate but poisons the debate on public issues." Thomas Sowell claimed that, despite its political prominence, no trickle-down theory has ever existed among economists. In response, many critics referred him to Stockman's remarks to Greider. Sowell replied in his newspaper columns. Stockman himself had not proposed or advocated the alleged theory, so Sowell rejected him as an example of someone who had done so. Additionally, Stockman had not specifically named anyone who, or quoted a source that, advocated the theory, although he did claim that the theory was being adhered to by the Reagan administration. Sowell replied that Stockman was not even among the first 1,000 people to make that claim, but that not one of those who made the claim could provide a single quote from anybody who had advocated a trickle-down theory. See also, A Rising Tide Lifts All Boats, Economic Inequality, Keynesian Economics, Laffer Curve, Neoliberalism, Progressive Tax, Supply-Side Economics, Trickle-Up Effect, S Corporation, Matthew Effect, References. Further reading, Agon, Philippe. Bolton, Patrick. A Theory of Trickle-Down Growth and Development. Review of Economic Studies 64, 151 €172 doi, 10.2307/2971707. JSTORA 2971707 Gerald Marvin Meyer, Joseph E. Stiglitz Frontiers of Development Economics, The Future and Perspective PA 422, Carla Hoff and Joseph E. Stiglitz Adverse Selection and Institutional Adaptation, Department of Economics Working Paper Series / University of Maryland, College Park, Department of Economics Number 98-2, Randy P. L. Belder, June Lapidus, Elaine McCrae, Edwin Melendez. Mink Coats Don't Trickle Down, The Economic Attack on Women and People of Color. ISBN 0-89608-328-4. External links, Ronald Reagan's Legacy, Frank, Robert. In the Real World of Work and Wages, Trickle-Down Theories Donia Unregistered Trademark T. Holdup. New York Times. Retrieved March 5, 2008 A.